The roof is leaking, and we are investing in buckets. Deconstructing the villain creation story. A 17-year study conducted, like I start off with stats, and I said I wasn't gonna do it, but this one. A 17-year study conducted by sociologist Stephanie DeLuca at Johns Hopkins University found that, among other things, economically insecure people change their living residence more often than those who are financially stable. Now, that sounds like saying the sun rises in the east to most folks in here. It connects. Now, Ms. DeLuca could have, of course, saved herself quite some time had she had the opportunity to speak to the average fifth grader in Milwaukee. Let me tell you a story about a boy I know. He went to 8 different schools by the time he was 10 years old. His A score was a 4 before his feet could hit the floor in the land of milk and honey, where not everyone will get a pour. This little boy was raised by a poor, single, Black teenage mother of 2. His beginnings were like the excerpt from a Dear Mama Tupac. Now, knowing that, you probably wouldn't need a crystal ball to know that this combination of demographic data greatly increased the likelihood of them experiencing housing insecurity. His family moved a lot, and no matter where they moved, his family could never afford it. Either the owner sold the building, the rent went up, or utility bills spike, and there was a choice between paying the light bill and paying the rent. It was always something. They moved to a new home, then back to his granny's house, then to a new home, then back to the granny's house. Rinse and repeat. Between the grades of kindergarten and 5th grade, he attended Our Avenue Elementary School, Byron Kilbourne, Alexander Mitchell, Morgandale, Green Bay, Forest Homes, back to Green Bay, then Lancaster, where he finally graduated from the 5th grade. This was normal for him. Not just because it always happened to him, but because many of his friends in his neighborhood were going through the same thing. He didn't know it at the time, but this was a function of living in profane poverty. And the K through 12 educational drawbacks to this type of instability are probably unquantifiable. Take that. Now imagine the infinite widening of the gaps within education as well as economics when the crack cocaine bombs were set off in poor and middle class Black and brown communities throughout the country. If you're too young to remember what that looked like, I'll tell you. It looked a lot like the current opioid epidemic, except instead of appropriating billions of dollars to heal families and communities, our government doubled down on the breakdown by passing laws on drug wars and appropriating billions of dollars to build jails and prisons to warehouse Black and brown folk. Did y'all know that in northern Wisconsin, in the northern woods of Wisconsin, there's lobbies in their small councils where they would get together and go to the state, put together plans to lobby the state to build the prison in their town, right? This is not a secret. This is not like some conspiracy. This is public information. This is well known. There are prisons in the northern woods of Wisconsin that the entire economy is predicated on, which means that when we're talking about recidivism and addressing the reentry effort and curbing recidivism, if we are successful, then that will cripple economies in the northern woods. So when you think about how much folks are putting in effort, then you think about what the outcome of that would be. It would be greatly impactful for folks that are in those areas. In those areas, you can take a place like Fox Lake. If you took an area photo of Fox Lake 20, 30 years ago, it was all farms, corn feed land. Now you go there's hotels and culvers and all kind of industry. And if you look to see what company is there, the only company is the prison, right? So when we talk about the incentivizing folks to really put in effort to curb recidivism, we have to understand what's on the other side of that. And then we might pull that string and find the reluctance that we see that will become very apparent. By the time this young man reached 5th grade, crack cocaine had already saturated Black and brown neighborhoods in the cities across the United States. His family in his neighborhood was no exception. The summer before he entered the 6th grade, he and his sister decided that enough was enough. So they caught the bus to Children's Court and filed a CHIPS petition on themselves. For those of you unfamiliar with CHIPS, the acronym stands for Child in Need of Protective Services. One would think that involving the authorities, it would bring some resolution to this tumultuous lifestyle they were enduring. However, this added to the chaos and instability. He often said that if his life was in the toilet when their mother was on drugs, then filing the CHIPS petition was akin to flushing that toilet. They were temporarily placed with his grandmother while she was already managing a house full of children who had been deserted as a result of the sickness of crack addiction as well. Shortly after being placed in their grandmother's care, he began to act out in school. He was often told, "You're too smart to be acting like this," or "You know better," or "What would your mother say?" In the 6th grade, he received a 72 card. That's a referral for those of you who are not from MPS. Almost twice a week. He was constantly being asked, "What's wrong with you?" And every time he thought to state his position, he considered his circumstances, and before words could come out, he was often flooded with the type of emotion and emotional embarrassment that evoked suicidal ideation. He was a mess internally, and he began to struggle to put up the front externally. If any of you are familiar with how unpredictable trauma unfolds, you know that the external front can only last for so long before there's an explosion. We're witnessing explosions every day, all through this community. Not getting what he needed at school or home, he turned to the community around him. He jumped off the proverbial porch, which is to say he began to engage in the politics of the block. And by politics, I mean who gets what. The first day he skipped school in his life, he was arrested for party to a crime, attempted armed robbery, that he stopped. He was charged, sentenced to 1 year intensive supervision, and was sent back to his grandmother's home, all by the same judge that placed him in his grandmother's care for the CHIPS petition. The boy tried to explain that he didn't do anything other than skip school. No one cared. His attorney told him, "Sign this paper and you get to go home." He signed. That signature moved him from a child to a juvenile. He continued disruptive behavior in school, which led him to being placed in a child adolescent treatment center for 30 days. Then eventually he went to St. Charles Residential Children's Facility with no end date being shared with him. While in St. Charles, his peers consisted of youth being released from Lincoln Hills and Ethan Allen, as well as those who were en route to those places. It was at St. Charles that he began to actively engage in delinquent behavior. He began to run away with the other residents and participated in joyriding and stolen cars with groups of them. It wasn't long before they were being pursued by police. After exhaustive chase, he was caught and taken to detention center, where he waited to see the same judge. He thought surely the judge would recognize the pain and trauma he was dealing with. The outcries for help were evident. All the signs were there. Nope, he was sent to Lincoln Hills. No counselor, no therapy, no cognitive interventions. Up until that point, not one person had ever sat down with him and connected his behavior to being moved from his mother's home. He started out asking for help less than 2 years prior. He was a good student prior to all this turmoil, No one paid attention to the signs. His time at Lincoln Hills was rife with overt and covert racism and discrimination from the staff. He reminisced on the final night in Lincoln Hills because a staff member came to his room and expressed what he really thought of the boy and people like him in no uncertain terms. He was adamant that the boy would return soon. Rather than being released to his mother's care, who was in recovery at the time, he was sent to Nora's Adolescent Treatment Center in Mugwanago, Wisconsin for 9 months. This was additional torture. The dual treatment that the Black kids received versus white kids was reminiscent of Jim Crow South. When blatant discriminatory practices occurred and were pointed out, they were explained away or ignored. He was finally released to his mother's care, and not before long, he started his freshman year in high school. Starting school, everything was a blur. He was not doing well with the mental adjustments involved in returning to a normal life. It seemed like he was suffering from PTSD and no one cared. He kept quiet. Even when he felt like he was going crazy, he kept quiet. The boy retreated from school and began hanging on the block on a regular. A close friend of his, who was more like a big cousin, began to press him to go to school. The friend even bought him clothes and shoes and allowed him to drive his vehicle to school daily. On December 6th, the friend and the boy had a falling out because he had discovered the boy was still skipping school while he had his car. He was very upset, and he told the boy if he saw him on the block during school days, there would be a problem. On December 8th, 2 days later, that friend was shot in the head on the corner of 22nd and Chambers with his mother, father, and toddler sister present. He was 20 days from his 19th birthday. On December 9th, the next day, the boy was sent to school. No counselor, no pep talks, no one cared. He was supposed to stomach this life-altering event at 14 years old, similar to when he witnessed multiple people shot at Moody Park several years earlier. He went to school almost every day for the remainder of the 10th grade and didn't complete one assignment. The boy was there but unengaged, and no one engaged him. The following year, he left James Madison High School and enrolled in Shalom Alternative School. This was a very different environment. It was small, personable, and best of all, for the first time in his life, he had a Black man as a teacher, Tony. This seemingly small factor had a profound impact on the boy's experience. He now had something to look forward to at school. However, that only lasted for so long. Unfortunately, the residual effects of trauma were still present and untreated. Therefore, poor choices continued to happen from time to time. He began to slip in school and started missing days. He had a child, so now he needed money. He was arrested at 17 years old and charged as an adult for possession of marijuana. He was fined $660 and released. Since he didn't want to return to incarceration and needed money, he got a second shift job at a steel factory. He began to work so much overtime that he was not waking up to go to school the next day. After a few weeks, one morning, he awoke to his entire homeroom class standing in his bedroom with Tony out front. This act brought him to tears, seeing his peers and teacher committed to his success. This was not his experience in the past. It was acts like this and multiple others by Tony that allowed him to graduate from high school on time. It was by the skin of his teeth, but nonetheless, he graduated. After barely graduating high school with a 1.8 cumulative GPA, his options were limited. He continued to work at the steel factory and had one foot in the streets. After about 9 months of working, he decided to enlist in the military. He signed up for the Air Force, took his ASVAB, and scored off the charts. Just when he thought he was out, the possession of marijuana charge came up, and he needed to pay the $660 in order to finalize his recruitment. Of course, he didn't have the money. The recruiter took him to the courts to file a motion to reopen and tried to get community service. The judge denied the motion, and the boy didn't join the military. Instead, he placed both feet in the streets and began to engage in the underground economy. He was heading down a dark path, and death was all around him. Friends were being killed and jailed on a daily basis. After being involved in a shooting where he received a flesh wound, his mother became increasingly concerned with his life, and she would pull up on the block and plead with him to do something with his life. One day, his mother pulled up while he was on the block, and she began to beg and plead with him to come with her. What do you think happened? Turned his life around. Anybody else? What do you think happened? He got hurt? Anything else? Anybody else? Did he go with her? What did he choose? Anybody else? The reality is it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter if he chose to oblige his mother and left the corner that day and changed his life for the better, or if he was murdered 1 week later on that very corner. What matters is these are the stories of our community, and much worse can be observed in real time on a daily basis throughout many urban and rural communities in the United States. This story is stuck on repeat. If you don't believe me, look at the stats. Why are we content with using bandages when a more effective treatment exists on the at-risk and prevention side? What are your thoughts? The roof is leaking and we're investing in buckets. And I came up this title because, you know, there's an old saying that the ship is sinking and we're arranging the deck chairs. Well, I think that would be unfair because there are folks who are doing work. They're siloed nonetheless, but there are folks who are doing work in this community who are doing important work, but it's usually on the back end. We're fixing problems that are fixable before they happen. You can see in this story, and I'll ask some questions, but there were so many points of intervention, and we see that daily. So when we go out in our community and we talk about the youth and the folks who are running red lights and stealing cars and things like that, we often don't look at how did this person get created? Where did this person start from? You know, often I hear folks talk about, you know, the parents, and I hear folks talk about the teachers and the police. And, you know, I agree that it needs to be a community effort. But at the end of the day, while everybody's pointing fingers, nobody's focusing on the boy or the girl, right? While everybody's saying whose job it is, nobody's doing the job. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on these folks? I told y'all I'm not a lecturer. I engage. So I'm only reason I'm behind this table is because I'm trying to respect social distancing. But I usually like to come in the crowd. But what are y'all thoughts? What are your thoughts in general of this kid's story? Definitely. How many of us, definitely, how many of you know, have or know somebody who has a similar story? I mean, yeah, the hands are up in the room for folks online. It is something that, like I said, is all too common. Can anybody identify some possible points of intervention? Elmer, you said all of them. Possible points of intervention. I agree. I think one of the pieces in that uh, that I see and engage with my team about is reminding folks that this is you. You are serving you. This is not something that's separate or unconnected. This could be you, your mom, your cousin, your aunt, your uncle. And if you are so far removed from that, if you're perched so high, you feel like, yeah, that could never be me, then the way you engage with them will, you don't want to touch them. And that's you know, that's something that'll come out. And when you talk about that authenticity, that's something that you'll see when you're the customer being served. When if you notice the theme in there, when we talk about that pivotal piece, is the theme was no one cared, right? Is no one cared, and oftentimes is no one cared because it ain't my kid, right? It ain't my, you know, I mean, like I got mine. I'm gonna hold mine down, and I'm gonna go in the house, and you know they gonna do their thing out there. But oftentimes it's gonna still spill over, right? Like when you can do it, pour it all in your own, but if you ain't saying nothing about the kid next door, then your kid got to go out and deal with the kid next door. I had a hand right here, then here, then back there. Hmm. Hmm. I agree. You couldn't have said it better myself. I agree wholeheartedly. You know, I was a part of the governor's task force to look at Lincoln Hills. And I was one of the major catalysts who was pushing and lobbying the folks on this task force to move the serious juvenile offense facility to Milwaukee, because I felt that all the research shows that having a young folk connected to their community and being able to have the community wrap their arms around that person and be able to have folks who have similarly situated circumstances and things like that to be able to help you navigate it would be the most optimal way to curb the recidivism for these young folks and to get them on track. The community pushed back. They didn't want, I mean, just think about the contrast. I started off saying about these communities up north are lobbying to build prisons in their community and to bring our folks up into those communities, and then also get to count them for representation as it relates to the elections, give them no services, send them back to our community unwhole, and traumatize even further to continue the cycle. right? And then on the other end, we are pushing against being able to bring those kids and folks back, in our areas. It's fascinating to analyze and then to see who's duped us. Like where the misinformation comes from to keep us in the dark. Elmer, and then I got you. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I will do. Ooh, you want me to put addresses on this? Hmm. Um, yeah. I know Mr. Triggs. Mr. Triggs, I'll talk to you offline about who the judge was. But I believe I know who the judge was. But yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I don't think is germane to the color of who's in the position of authority. It's about the selflessness or selfishness of the person who's in that position. And just so happens that we might have people of color and black people in leadership positions. They're cogs in a machine. The machine is already built. If you replace that person, whether it's a white person or a black person or whatever, you're just replacing the cog, and the machine turns a certain way. And if you go against that, you're going to grind your cog, you're going to grind your gears off. That's just the way it is right now until we have folks who um, are connecting together and have more of a force to push back and turn it in a different direction. You are a nuisance if you're the one who's in there who's pushing for the change that's so much needed. So I mean, I just want people to understand that even when we get the person who's saying all the things right and really have the heart for the community, is not something that happens overnight, and it won't happen with them alone, right? The person that's in the political position, they only have so much influence. The real influence, I think, comes from the people. It comes from the folks who are like us and you all who are doing the work and pressing the knuckles and being loud and steady, staying on the folks about these issues. Because at the end of the day, we know that these are the things that undergird the problems in our community. When you want to talk about kids running red lights and things like that, there was a politician whose proposal was we need to fund more driver's ed in the schools. So to me, that's just totally disrespectful, right? That's a bucket, right? And not a very good one at that, right? It's a bucket with a leak in it. You know, that is there the thought that these kids don't understand that red light means stop? Like, is that what they really believe? Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is like there's a disregard for laws and safety, and we need to figure out the why, right? And what undergirds the why. But we're creating this. We're creating the villains in our community every day, and we're creating them when we know that our neighbors on heroin and not there with the kids, and we get up and walk off and just leave the kids out there, pampers and looking bad, and we get in our car and pull off. We're helping create it. If you don't say anything, silence is consent. If you're not participating in addressing the issues, then you are a part of the problem. And that's just what it is. And yeah, you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to take care of your neighbor kid. You shouldn't have to do this or that. You shouldn't, but we can operate on the world that should be or the world that is. And the reality of the world it is that if there are parents who are not taking care of their responsibility, then should no one do anything? Should the school say, well, you know what, it's the parent that didn't do the job, so what you want us to do? Everybody owes some fault. I had teachers who, when I would be in class, we would have a substitute teacher. We're a clown, right? Everybody had the same parent in that teacher class and the next teacher class, but they acted different, right? So there's some level of accountability and where the bar is set in some of the schools as well. But I say all this to say is that we're building sandcastles and you can't do it one hand. So no matter where you go, whatever problem, whatever issue you think is the most important problem in our community, if you know about building sandcastles, if you dig your hand in the sand and you move the sand, it's all gonna fall around for all the other area, right? And that's really what's happening until we all can put our hands together and put the plan together and connect it and connect the silos, because we're not gonna eliminate them. Right? We're not going to, people talk about tearing down silos. You're not going to tear down silos as long as people have light bills and mortgages and things like that. They're not going to tear down silos because Maslow's hierarchy suggests that folks are going to go to do what the most important piece for them and their family first. That's just reality. So, but we can connect. So I'm not going to take food out of my kid's mouth, but I might have some extra. And if I got some extra, then it's incumbent upon me as a citizen of the planet, right? Is as Muhammad Ali said, service is the rent we pay for the space we occupy on this planet. So the fact that when you got a little extra, if you're not giving it, then like I said, you become part of the problem. Before I close, what time we got? Okay, before I close, I did tell y'all I was gonna get y'all out of here in time for lunch. I want to leave y'all with this, and I dedicate it to Melvin Williams and Robert Morris. You always got a spot on my block. On my block, where everything is everything for Sheezy. On my block, we probably done it all, homie, believe me. On my block, we made the impossible look easy for Sheezy. That's why I never leave my block. My people need me. I stand by the block because I was made by way of the block. Everything I am and am not started with a block. Peep the backdrop. My sister playing hopscotch. My cousin on the bench waiting to bowl while I was in the top lot. A normal day at our avenue. Big Gross got him in the paint, banging him on the block. Shoot me, pop, pop, pop. It wasn't the ball asking to be shot. The first time I saw the battle go past the pop lock. The first time I saw a helicopter stop. The first time I saw my chances begin to drop. All happened the first time I saw a man get shot. I lie there, face to ground, eye to eye with the wrecked bag of building blocks that I dropped. In total shock, I remember the feeling I felt when I heard that man's heart had stopped, and how I was now expected to build over that back on my block, where everything is everything for Sheezy. Where we done seen it all, homie, believe me. Where we made impossible living conditions look easy for Sheezy. That's why I never leave my block. My family need me. I stand on the block, still looking to be the man on the block. No cocaine, but bricks still in hand for the block, but this time accompanied by blueprint plans for the block. Peep the backdrop. You see, when I was knee-high to a grass hop, they taught me to look at the flick of the wrist in the Pyrex or a glass pot. Had me helping flood my hood with white top. I got homies who still in the spot because they perceptions bind them to who they not. Every time the starter pistol is shot, they stumbling but still can't get off the block. So they wall us off like sheetrock, ensure the flood would never stop. They look set with gold chains, but when cocaine drove the lane, them fools turned to Vlade Divac, anticipating the charges they flopped. That's when they came and extracted half my block and turned us into livestock. Took us long past the last bus stop to towns full of poor whites whose economies have come to count on the cell block. while we get counted on the cell block. Is our black bodies for sale or not? Whether these black bodies get bailed or not, my homies like to stay on the trail that's hot, not knowing if it's leading to hell or not. Whether these reentry efforts fail or not, our mentality can't be too scared to let go and build a block where everything is everything for Sheezy, where we all trying to come up, George and Wheezy, where anybody easied off if they get greasy for Sheezy. That's why I never leave my block. My homies need me. I stand with the block because I'm coming to get the block before they flip a switch and get rid of the block. Made possible because most y'all who left forgot. Peep the curtain drop. They in office, but they ain't making the hurting stop. They want us content with what we got, like we ain't putting no dollars up in the pot. When we dying of thirst and it's hot, these water pistol politicians too scared to squirt on the block, selling us out like we twerk on the block. Election coming up, so now they work for the block until the polls close and then we dirt on the block. That's why we get it out the mud and stay alert on the block. A.L. Smith gone, ain't no work on the block till Pfizer slid in with them pills and dessert for the block. No patty cakes, but they dripping syrup for the block. So in 22, when they come to lurk on your block, tell them folks not to skirt on your block unless they got resources to insert on your block, where everything is everything for Sheezy. Thank you.